Hey there, family. Welcome back to the second hour of Love and Life on WURD, Progressive Black Talk Media. That's 96.1 FM and 900 AM. Welcome to the second half of today's episode of Love and Life. I am your host, Carol Riddick. If this is your first time joining us, I did let everyone else know in the first hour that I do have a co host. His name is Donavan West. And he and I, although we alternate episodes, we do come together at the end of the week for the last episode. But in our last hour, I stated that I would try to join him in the conversation, and I was able to do so. Thank you so much for obliging. Please, family, say hello to my co host, Donavan West.
Carol, what's up? Dr. Scott, what's good? What's good?
Hey, Donovan.
Hey, look, listen, Carol, we got to tell the audience the truth. Listen, when I heard of who your guest speaker was today, okay, and then, of course, the topic of discussion, it was going to look domestic if I was not going to be able to join this conversation, okay? Let's just call it what it is, all right?
Okay. You know what? Let's be real. Would you say call a bean? A bean? Okay, he is absolutely right. When I called him, I said, Donovan, okay, I have Dr. Tina Scott on the show. Will you please join? He said, what? Okay, just tell me when and where. So
Just
there
send
it
the
is.
link. Send
There
the
it
link.
is.
Let's do this. Okay. No, listen, I've been listening and wow, like the nuggets, I'm not surprised. I'm not even impressed because this at some point you just know at the end of the day, this is what Dr. Scott does. You coming through with those questions too. You know, you were like, look, I want to know more. And you just kept peeling the layers back. And Dr. Scott coming through with all that great advice. I was just like, wait up. I need a pen that's working right now. You know, that's where I was at with it.
A pencil with no eraser. I
Listen,
got it.
I think it's so important because a lot of times you're in a space where you're providing people information. You forget that person that's providing information also needs to have a space and place for them to get information
Mm-hmm.
as well as
Mm-hmm.
unload. So I was just like, oh, thank you for these reminders, especially at this time of the year, right? Right when we're at this space, where we want to start remembering what we want to do as being part of the recipe for success. Thank you very much for those really good pointers, at the top of this year.
Family, we were talking with Dr. Scott in our first hour. Now, this is if you're just joining us. For those of you who sat with us and are continuing to hang out, we've been talking about single love, single life. We've been talking about navigating it. We've been talking about everything that involves it: loneliness, anxiety, depression, guilt. Everything that might actually be magnified
Mhm.
because you're a single person, you know and that is about what Donovan was talking. I shared some personal experiences of my own, and as you all know, I say we're family here, and this is where we share, we talk about
Yeah.
things unapologetically. Am I right about it, Donovan?
No, you're absolutely right. And what I think also gets magnified is not only the fact that when you're single and going through these things, but also then the holidays, right? We just came
Mm-hmm.
through the holidays, and you talked about going to certain events and not wanting to be that one individual who is not attached with someone. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that hit home. You go to a space and place, and you're the single one, right? And so you're looking at these other couples, and you might say to yourself, well, I'm strong enough and I'm good and I feel great, and I'm happy in my singleness and all that stuff. But these holiday events with they hit different. They hit different.
Whew,
And
they hit hard. They hit hard. Listen.
I'm there like, wait, hold up. Like, the old school term, getting rolled on. You feel like you're getting rolled on,
What?
sometimes. So, so I'm glad that again, that transparency, right? The vulnerability that we said we're going to provide in this space. And when we say family, we really mean family as
Mhm.
we're talking to our audience and even to one another. So I'm glad that you were able to share that because that definitely hit home, being in that space and place where you're having conversations and then you go into these types of events, especially during the holidays, and it's a different kind of
Mhm.
conversation. Sometimes the conversation is no conversation,
There you
right?
have it.
That awkward silence. You're just looking at each other, and They clutching the pearls and just kind of like,
Yeah, I was about to say they're
so
having the
what's this budget?
conversation about you. You're not in the conversation
Yeah.
Right?
because they're talking about you being the single
Yeah.
person in the room. Well,
Mhm.
well, I have a question for you, Donovan, and then I want to continue the conversation with Dr. Scott. You were speaking of that one, um, uh, one thing that was mentioned in the first hour. What else stood out to you about what we talked about in the first hour?
Well, you know what? I like the idea of staying, like, keep moving, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Gotta keep your feet moving. And I think that's one of the major things that I'm often sharing. And it's easier said than done, but it must absolutely be done. It really does. Like if you stop moving, then you start to the process of decaying, if you will, right?
That's
Your
true.
spirit decaying, your energy decaying, your body language, everything. Like literally, you can start walking around and you'll be at the supermarket and looking like a wilted leaf. And people
Mm,
are like, what's wrong with you? Like, did you lose a couple vertebrae in your back? Like, how did that happen? Why are you looking like the letter C? Well,
Mhm.
it's because you haven't really been active, and it's almost just to the extent of like a flower and vitamin D, right? Like
Mhm.
the more exposure you get to the vitamin D, to the sunlight, the more you can actually stand upright, and your petals and everything else that you
mm,
have that really distinguish you really looks good. But the less, guess what happens? You turn into mold, right? You just turn into this thing that has no real shape or form or anything that's discernible. And then you just hang around in that corner. And that's literally what happens. So I was really happy when I heard Dr. Scott talk about no matter what, just keep moving, keep your feet moving. And for all of those who are holding on to the Bibles and saying, well, I'm just staying still because that's what my God said. Pause. I need you to read the whole chapter.
oh,
Okay. I need you to read all of that. Okay.
oh,
It doesn't mean I'm not telling anybody to run to the club. We're not
right.
saying that. Okay. We're not talking about practicing tip drills either. None of that. But what I am saying is that I it definitely resonated with me when I heard that piece of advice about staying
Same.
active, keeping your feet moving, and making sure that you don't become a recluse,
Mhm.
right? All in your feelings, and that's all you have is you keeping company with these negative emotions. And I think that part right there really resonated in a way that was very unique. The whole idea of, well, answering the question, so what does that look like? And then Dr. Scott talks about, dating yourself, right?
Mhm,
Hanging out
mhm,
and having a good
mhm.
time. And what we mean by that is like the dating part is where you are smiling, you're engaged, you enjoy yourself, you're present, not that you're
Exactly.
just decided to take yourself on a pity date. No, no, no. That's when you're out in public having a bad time with yourself. Now think about that for a second.
I'm glad you said that though,
Right?
because you're
Having a
talking
bad
about
time by
being
yourself.
comfortable with yourself.
Yeah.
But when one thing that I always say, be present. Be present in the moment. Enjoy that moment. Live in that moment. That's important for me and to me. It is so important to be present. I want to pivot and go back to Dr. Scott for a moment. I have a few other questions, but Donovan, I'm so glad you joined the conversation because I see that you were paying attention to Dr. Scott and you were listening to my little trials and tribulations too. So,
Oh,
so
come on, man.
I'm glad.
Listen,
I'm glad.
I wasn't saying that like how people saying like,
No,
yeah, yeah, I hear you, but no, 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 no. I
no,
was
you were there. You were
I was
present.
there like, wait,
You
what? Hold on, run that back.
you were present. Thank
Mhm.
you. But so, Dr. Scott, before we left the prior hour, I was talking about being comfortable
Mhm.
while being single. And, there's the question that is always posed: can one be comfortable with being single? So we were talking about jumping into that in this hour. So I want to, get into that. Can
Right.
one actually be comfortable with being single since there's this stigmatism about it?
Yeah. Well, here it is. It's how one defines comfort, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so often when we find our discomfort in singleness is because that's where we find our comfortability, if that makes sense. And I know I'm using the same word, but you can be comfortable in your singleness. And here it is take a clean page and just rewrite the narrative of whatever you were thinking before. Because once you found the comfort in being with someone, and that's great, But just because you and that someone is not together now doesn't mean life has to be uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
You just gotta write a new narrative for it. And here it is. Donovan said something earlier, and I want to just say this, that so often people will make us feel uncomfortable, and they'll whisper and they'll talk and they'll clutch their pearls, but never weigh yourself on somebody else's scale. So maybe they're
There you
uncomfortable with you being single. That's their stuff, right? Let them have that, because we can't change how they're thinking. However, we can change our narrative, and then we gotta, like Sade talk about the bulletproof soul. Put
Mm-hmm.
that bulletproof around your soul, so when people start talking all that stuff, it just bounce all over you, because that's nothing that you should let in. Easier said than done, but it is doable. It's just going to take some work.
I love what you just said.
Yeah.
Never weigh yourself on someone
Someone
else's
else's spirit.
scale.
Yeah.
Okay, I just had to let that, just give that a moment of silence
Let
because we
that breathe. You
needed.
gotta let that breathe, right?
You have to let that breathe. But there's so much truth to that. So
Yeah.
much truth to that. Everything that you said in the first hour was I was telling you that it resonated with me because as a single woman, I've found it necessary to find out what I like, what I don't like, to take that time with myself. I've been dating myself for a minute now, and we have a great time together. We just have a great time together. Now that I know, some of the things that I like to do. And I was explaining too that even identifying with the fact that, you know, I can be a big kid at times.
Mhm.
I love that about me.
Mhm.
So I do things to cater to what I like. If that's going to the zoo, which it is sometimes for me, or coloring. Sometimes I color in a coloring book, but that's
Mhm.
therapeutic for me.
Mhm.
I love it. I love it. And I'm just saying that, family, with you all, because while I'm saying it to you, some people might say, "Oh, she's crazy. She is crazy." But that's what works for me.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's what I like. So I'm encouraging you to find what works for you as well, to identify what it is that makes you comfortable and allows you to live your best life.
That's right.
But
And I
Donna,
think what you said was really on point because, even as you're having more fun and you're understanding the things that really make you tick, the things that bring you joy, that's the part that makes you attractive, right?
Mhm.
Like that's the part people need to understand that is, you know, seeing you in your space with that kind of energy, with that glow, and that's what I'm looking at. I haven't even joined the party, right? That's the thing.
mm-hmm,
And people need to understand that if you're in a space where you feel like you're languishing in your singleness, then what makes you think people, I mean, I know we say this often, like, misery loves company and there's pity
mm-hmm,
parties, but no, those are short lived. Okay, they last as long as the bonbons will stay cold, right? I mean, ultimately, that's very short lived. So the idea that you are a person that has joy, that has the ability to have a sense of humor, that works. And I think that's what a person needs to understand. And even as you go deeper into the relationship, one of the things that I've always shared with with couples or individuals is that you don't necessarily need to be in love with the thing that turns that person on, right?
mm-hmm,
Like if that person is into technology or into birds or into whatever, you
Mhm.
don't need to be in love with that thing. You need to
mm-hmm,
be in love with what it does to the person with whom you have interest.
Mhm.
That's what you need to be in love with, right? Is if
Mhm.
I
yeah,
see you smiling, if I see you, your spirit is lit on fire, if I see you engaged, if I see you wake up in the morning with a sense of why, right? Wrapped in your soul and your spirit, that's what I love. And whatever
right,
it happens to be that is the tool or the mechanism that does that, great for you. Now, of
Mhm.
course, should I show some level of interest? Should you have a story about it or something? Yeah, but the point is that I think people get fixated on the frequency being so exact in terms of the things you like and in what area and all that stuff. That's going to keep you single for a very, very long time, right?
mm,
But to focus more on if you can learn yourself, like Dr. Scott said, dating yourself, having a good time, like you said, and people seeing that on the outside, well,
mm-hmm,
I think that's going to be the number one attractor to say, you know what? I am not walking into this space, this environment, with the burden of having to be your court gesture, right?
right,
I am not the one that has to make the queen, entertain the queen in that moment, or I lose my head. That's not what we're here for. I'm here to compliment. And I
mm-hmm,
think, if anything, when someone has that level of peace and that level of awareness of self, then you can actually be in a more healthy space to continue into whatever that friendship that may develop into a relationship, whatever that may be. You actually are coming off from a starting point that's actually healthy, and there's less, I'm gonna say less, there's
Yeah.
less drama, because we all still got some hidden minds that are still activated within
Hidden minds. Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, you're right about that though, about being healthy. You're right. You're right about that. And those healthy minds, those hidden minds. I can even get it out. Those hidden minds. We
yeah.
all do have that. We
We
all do
still
have
do
that.
have them, yeah, absolutely. So, but I think the background, having that experience with one another, and learning the goofy side, learning these other components, that also provides the level of, the buffer, if you will. So, should you trip one of those emotional minds, right, and it
Mm-hmm.
goes 0 to 1,000 real quick, or there's a trauma or something, you have at least a wealth of those other experiences to buffer against that, and say, well, this wasn't all negative. This wasn't all whatever. Here's some other
Right.
dimensions to this person that allows you to survive that. Because I think one of the other things that becomes a major challenge is our overall tolerance, right?
Mhm.
Woo.
So,
That's
right?
so important.
Yeah.
That is so, so, so important as we talk about living a single life and navigating it. Everything that you just said about being in touch with yourself and about identifying, the fact that once you get to a healthy space, because we all know that we're going to have some baggage or hidden minds or however we want to call it, just identifying and accepting that we all have that. Once you yourself, are accepting of that, it puts you in a better place already, just dealing with the reality of the situation and accepting that that is real. Nobody's perfect.
Mhm.
Nobody.
Mhm.
Family, if you're just joining us, I would like to let you know that you're listening to Love and Life on WURD, Progressive Black Talk Media. That's 96.1 FM and 900 AM. We're talking about living a single life, living a single existence, navigating love, life, detachment, loneliness, grief, depression, all of that. We're talking about all of those things, and we're joined. Well, my co host has joined us as well, Donovan West, but we're also joined by our guest today, who is Dr. Tina Scott. you know if you missed the description earlier in the first half of our show, Dr. Scott is a psychotherapist who explained to us just a few facets of what she does and what it means, to do her job. She's a best-selling author, she's a public speaker, she's a licensed professional counselor. We talked about therapy parties and all kinds of things. I'm trying to tell you, I think I'm going to host one and you're going to be invited. But what I would like to do, because we have my co-host in the room, I'm so excited. Can't you tell? I
Mhm.
want to continue the conversation about being single and navigating the dating pool while being single, living a mature single life. We touched on that, just we were all chuckling about that. And we said, okay, that's definitely something, because that was something that I wanted to address with you in the room, Donovan. So, Dr. Scott, can you talk with us about that? I'm sure you've had this conversation more than a few times. How do we navigate the dating pool, living a mature single life?
Well, I think we definitely hit on a lot. And when Donovan mentioned just being yourself, like dating
Mm-hmm.
yourself and connecting with yourself, too often when we get in relationships, you know what we do? We throw away ourselves and we try to conform to what whoever we want to impress. Our representative go out in front of us, right? And then we wind up living a long life like that. And then if the relationship becomes over and we wind up in this place called singleness, we don't even know who we are no more. We was
Mm-hmm.
wearing red, and red wasn't even our favorite color. We hate red, and we still wearing red, and we're like, I hate red, but I don't even know what I like, right? Get in touch with like what you like doing, because sometimes we try to conform to someone else. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't blend, but
Mm-hmm.
when you know that self, get in touch with what you like. And then once you get into another relationship, make sure you bring that person with you, Because what happens is we tend to throw it out because we want someone so bad that we lose that self when we should be actually moving towards ourselves. So really, during your singleness, during this time, stop looking at it like it's a disease, because it's not a disease, right? This is
Mm-hmm.
an opportunity for you to connect with yourself. Like I said, date yourself. And if you don't like dating yourself, what makes you think somebody else is? So allow
Well,
yourself,
How about that?
date yourself, take yourself out to dinner. And people do look. 'Cause sometimes I'll still go out and eat by myself, and people are like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I'm fine. Please,
Yeah.
I want to be by myself, right? I don't want nobody sitting at the table with me, right?" But getting comfortable with dating you, right?
Mm,
Getting comfortable with showing up how you want to look on your date. Because, like I said, sometimes we wear red because somebody else wants us to wear red. Identify what you want to look like when you go out on your date. Sit with yourself
mm-hmm.
and,
Mm-hmm.
and just really just get to know who you are. So when you show up in your next situation, you're bringing the authentic version of yourself, not the version that somebody else wants you to be.
That right there was a mouthful. Wouldn't you say, Donovan? Your authentic self.
authentic self. You got to show up your authentic self. And when you're dating yourself, right, and you get to be comfortable being by yourself, here's the other part that's so important. During these holidays, we feel more pressure to want to have someone with us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you stop that whole idea of negotiating what it is that you're really looking for during those times, because that fear of being by yourself,
Mm,
coupled with the sense of loneliness and also the awkwardness of being by ourselves, right? All those things come together for the perfect negative kind of cocktail that we all are sipping during the holidays. And then that what happens is before you know it, you're hanging out with some negotiables.
mm.
Bad move, bad move. Now you're there hanging out, and guess what? You can't get them off of you because now it's January. And you looking like it was really temporary, right? Nah, it's too late now.
Right.
They got feelings. You sitting there looking like, yo, you got buyer's remorse, and and now it becomes, like you said, one of those situations, right, where you're sitting here like, okay, how do I creep out of this room, that I walked into, right? So I think that level of comfort with yourself allows you that even as you're interacting with a possible, right, that it doesn't become a definite just because of the holidays, right, that it doesn't become something that you're saying, you know what you start looking at it sideways and all that. No, if you are comfortable being by yourself, then you can also get comfortable with the idea that, yes, it's been a while since I've met with someone that's actually gotten my interest or entertained me at this level, but yet and still this person may not be it, right? And I'm
Mm-hmm.
okay with that, instead of thinking, well, it's been 6 months or it's been 3 years or it's been whatever. Those thoughts no longer have the same kind of value and weight once you get more comfortable with the idea that this is who you are and this is what
Mm-hmm.
you're not, right? So you talking to someone and they talking read this and read that, and you like, look, I don't even like anything that's anything in that family. I know it's time for me to maintain eye contact as I'm backing up slowly from this situation. you know
Yeah. I
One.
was Oh, I'm sorry.
No, no, no. Go right ahead.
I was on one time I was on Facebook, and it was a guy on there, and he had his full description, his full bio. He said, "Rent me for the holiday," right?
Mm-mm.
Because because so many people wanted someone to show up with so they wouldn't have to answer all these questions, right? Rent me for the holiday so your family and friends don't have to ask you all these different questions. I don't know if it was a real ad, but when I posted, a lot of people was like. So just think about what Donovan was saying about buyer's remorse. If it's that bad, then maybe that's an option, right?
No, no. I think he watched too many movies. That's what I think happened there. Because
No,
that
I
that's been
think
the premise
I
of a
think
few
he made a
movies.
lot of money.
I
That's what
know,
I think. I
I
think he
think
made
he
a
did
he
too.
did. I
I
know he did.
I don't doubt that he made a lot of money, but I think he watches entirely too many movies because that's from where I'm sure he got that
Yes.
idea. That
And the
we've
price
all
went
seen
up
those.
if you took pictures with him. If you want a picture, family pictures, it went up like another $100, $200. He had a package.
What? See, no, okay. I have to give him props for being an entrepreneur
Yeah.
and being on his hustle. So, I'm trying to give props where props are due. But at the same time, what?
Yes.
That part.
Family, family, listen, we are not suggesting that you subscribe to that.
That's
We are
right.
not in any way making that suggestion. Okay. I just want to be clear. If you
Yes.
are just joining us, I want to make sure you did not think we were making any suggestions.
Listen,
We were
right now there's a lot of
merely
people
sharing.
cash apping their cousins right now.
Right,
Right,
right.
it's a whole mess out there. We're gonna
Yes.
blow the lid off of this. This what's really
Yes.
going down is a
Yes.
lot of situations like
You
that.
may see the
Okay,
same mate on a lot of people's social media profile.
Oh my goodness.
facts. Okay,
That is crazy. Okay. So, one question that I do have, because this tends to come up in conversation about, after having been single and going into a relationship, how much time would you consider is the appropriate amount of time before you are considered a couple?
Mm,
that's a good question. That's a good question. I mean, I think I think part of the challenge is the definition of time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I think a lot of people talk about, and Steve Harvey, was one of the people that really got people talking a lot about, 90 days or a certain amount of dates and things of that
Mm.
nature. But I always caution this whole thing around, the time and
mhm,
get into like content, like quality, so sometimes you get into a bunch of conversations, but what did you actually talk about? What is it that you really are learning about one another, and what levels of transparency and vulnerability have really exchanged like between each other in terms of the level of trust,
Mm-hmm.
not just how many dates did you go on, because often like with COVID, when they shut down everything, it shut down a major component of relationships, which was these distractions, entertainment, right? Things that, okay, we're going to go out, but 90% of the time we were in front of a movie theater, or we were at a pool table, or we were doing a paint and sip, but we weren't really necessarily learning one another, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a lot of opportunity for people to end up in a relationship because of them thinking about it being a certain amount of time versus, do we actually have like the content that qualifies the foundation for a healthy relationship? Meaning, how much actual quality time did we intentionally put into our friendship that then led into an actual relationship, or a dating space or a courting space? So I think those things that, by the way, I would say 99% of the time never get discussed.
Mm-hmm.
I think those components are really the components that should really be examined.
mhm.
That's that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, that's
No, I appreciate your 2 cents. I appreciate that was a nickel right there. That was more
mhm,
than 2 cents. That
mhm.
was,
Oh,
that was a whole nickel. But everything you said, made so much sense. And you're absolutely right, Dr. Scott. Do you have a comment about what Donovan said?
most definitely. When we talk about our foundation, right? Just laying that foundation and really deciding what you want that relationship to look like. And too often, you know, we see other people's timeline, and that
Mm-hmm.
timeline may not be our timeline, right? And some people may say we met love at first sight and been married for 15 years. Other people may say, well, we dated for a long time and then got married. So you just got to know the relationship that you're in, and based off of that relationship that you're in, what is it that you two both want? Because just because you date somebody doesn't mean that y'all gonna really stay connected, if that makes sense, right? some
Mm-hmm.
some some dates wind up being long-term friendships and not what we probably thought it could have been. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And some should remain friendships.
Yes.
Not,
Yeah,
some
it,
should.
it does. Just because we haven't been fighting and all that good stuff doesn't necessarily mean that we've graduated to this next stage in a relationship, right? So I think that's something to consider. And sometimes just the momentum and pressure that
Mm-hmm.
comes along with this thing called time, right?
Mm-hmm.
People end up in these relationships as opposed to saying, well, hold on. I mean, do we have the necessary content and the foundation to go to the next level, not just the time in? Like, I'm not looking for a gold watch after a certain period of
How
time.
about that?
Right.
As we're talking about time, something just popped into my spirit because as a female, as a single woman, I get asked the question from time to time. So when are you having kids? Or you're not, are you still married? Are you getting married? Or what have you? I get asked those questions. It never occurred to me until this moment now that we have you in the conversation, Donovan. Do you too get asked those same questions about?
Absolutely, absolutely. People think that right off the bat because you're a man that that no one asks a question, but no, people do this. Well, how long are you going to be out here, right? Like
Yeah.
intentionally we're just hanging out, just doing nothing, doing whatever. So I think that what people forget is that there are tons of men that are actually interested and very intentional about the idea of marriage, of finding that person for themselves and going down their roads. And so, yeah, I do get the question. When are you planning on? Don't you want to have another child? And all types of questions I get. I mean, hey, by the way, you're not getting any younger. Those
Oh
comments
yeah.
do actually happen. They happen for fellas too. Conversations like that take place. And I think that for depending on where you are, the space that you're in, there is also not the same pressure. I wouldn't dare say that, but
Mm-hmm.
there is definitely pressure depending on who you are, like your background and
Sure.
what kinds of expectations you have for yourself. And I think the more mature you get, the more the idea is that you just go ahead and just make a decision and make it happen, right? Which I think is dangerous. I think it's really dangerous for most guys. Is that you feel but just pull the trigger, just go ahead and
Mm.
make it happen. And it's like there is a certain amount of divineness in this in this union that you should be that you're seeking. And to just think because you may have options or right, because the pool may
Yeah.
be a certain kind of way for men and a certain space versus women, at least that's what's said out there, the idea that you should just go ahead and flip a switch and
Mm-hmm.
now
Mm-hmm.
you're ready to be married, right? Calm
You know, I'm
down.
so glad you said that. I'm glad to know that as a single woman, I'm not alone in that in that experience. But I'm glad that what you just said, it's interesting to me, Dr. Scott.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the ratio of men to women of single men to women with whom you speak about dealing with being single and navigating single life?
Well, you know what? Here it is. I can talk about the ratio that comes into my office. I
Mm-hmm.
would say probably one out of every four, right, are single, and
Okay.
and most of them are struggling with their singleness, if that makes sense. And I just want to add, Carl, this topic is so juicy that my computer was like on fire over here. So if you see me jumping up around, it's such a
Oh
it's such a good topic. I was like, where this plug at? Because you're not unplugging me right now. So, so excuse me for my bounce. But
no.
listen, this is a steamy topic. The computer started talking to me. But one out of every four that I
Well,
see, yes.
that
And I'm
is I'm
that's a
sorry.
that's a lot, right?
Yes, I was about to say that is
Mhm.
a lot. So that leads me to ask, because that number from, my own calculation is a lot. Um, we touched on, you and I, Dr. Scott, offline about this being such a big topic,
Mhm.
with regard to single people navigating and people not doing so well mentally and emotionally
Mhm.
navigating single life, and some wanting to take their lives because they have a hard time just being single. Is one really the lonely number?
No, it's not. It's one is not the lonely number. Sometimes two can be worse because you could be hooked up to somebody and it can cause you a total disaster, right? But we are led to believe that if you're by yourself, that is something wrong with you. And here it is. We all have some things that we need to work through and get through, right? But that doesn't
Indeed.
mean that we're something that should be thrown away. So just because somebody else may not have wanted you, however that relationship went, it
Hmm.
doesn't mean that you're not lovable and that you don't have the right to be here. But so many people want to end their life because somebody else is not in their life. I mean it from the bottom of my heart. They come in, they're crying, they're distraught. And it's easy for a friend on the outside, girl, man, get over that. And for our men, don't let a man cry and go to another man. Sometimes they be like, man up. Just all da. But here it is. We all have this desire to have a certain level of intimacy. And I'm not just talking about sex. Being intimate with someone that's loving on you, someone that cares about you, someone that when you wake up, how people be on Facebook, they talk about, I woke up like this. If you saw how I woke up, I don't wake up looking like no Beyonce. I wake up a little scary, right? And someone that actually see that and still love me, when I look at I'm like, you love me looking like this? All right, right? But here it is. So many of us have so many unrealistic expectations put on us based off of other people's stuff. And if you really, really talk to some of those people that have these unrealistic expectations, their life ain't even like that. But they got us believing that's what life should be like for ourselves.
So where do you begin when someone presents to you in that state saying, I just can't take it. I can't move forward. A single person comes to you and says, I can't move forward. I cannot live in this existence. Where do you begin with that conversation?
I ask them what's holding them back. And oftentimes what's holding them back, it can be their own thoughts. We talked about cognitive distortions. Like, if he don't love me or if she doesn't love me, no one will ever love me. I'm unlovable, right? And with my women, not all. So when I talk, I'm not talking in absolute. But with my women, a lot of them didn't have that love from their father when they was growing up. And now that they got this man that's loving on them, they don't want to let that go. Especially when you feel that you finally got that real love that Mary J talk about, that real love. You don't want to let it go. But sometimes what we think is real love isn't real love, right? It's just somebody just taking a step to love us. And they're putting limits on it when we can be loved so it's like so much greater, right? And really I try to just really understand what is the shackles on their feet that's making them feel the way that they're feeling, right? And a lot of times it goes back to some of the things that was poured into them throughout this thing called life. And what happens, we got to try to start unpacking it. And I do this exercise with my clients. It's called baggage check. Erica Badu talk about bag lady, and like she talks about what's in your bag. So I have my clients really talk about what's in their bag, and they write it out as a homework assignment, and then we process it, right? And they may have been rejected, they may have been abandoned, they may just feel lonely, they may have low self-esteem. And this is just not for my ladies, this is for my men too. And we just start unpacking that stuff, because that stuff that's in our backpack are the things that's prohibiting us from seeing a brighter day, a brighter future for ourselves as it pertains to life and in a relationship with someone else.
So how important would you say our upbringing is to the contributing factor of our adulthood and navigating who we are as an adult? I believe I'm understanding what you're saying, but I want to make sure that it's said plainly and clearly to our family that is listening.
Oh, listen, that has a lot to do with it, right? When we talk about our trauma in our lives, and most of us, now I want to say most, some of us may not deal with the trauma in our lives because sometimes we disassociate from it, right? Because the only way that we can keep moving on, because no one is helping us to unpack it, no one is really helping us talk about it. So now I need to disconnect from it. So if I disconnect, it will allow me to keep moving forward. But here it is. Trust me when I tell you, a lot of times, often when we disconnect from something, it comes back around somewhere. Back somewhere, like some of my clients that may have been abused in some way throughout life, and now they can't be intimate with their partner, right? And they're like, I don't know why, it just came out of nowhere. And then when you start unpacking a lot of that stuff from the past that you disassociated with, or you just suppress, start bringing a level of awareness. Oh, that's why things change for me. So definitely our history tells our story, right? And what we have to do, when I talked about sitting with yourself, we got to sit with ourselves, but it's not always good to sit by yourself. That's why having someone professionally help you through this, because you can bring all this stuff up and now you're looking at it and it's like, shucks, what am I supposed to do with this now? And if you don't have someone to help you, tell you, or not really tell you, but direct you and
Mm-hmm.
navigate through that, then we start having these suicidal ideations, or we start feeling hopeless, we start feeling worthless, and we just start going down this downward spiral.
Spiral. Oh my goodness. Family, if you are just tuning in, you are listening to Love and Life on WURD, Progressive Black Talk Media. That's 96.1 FM and 900 AM. I am your host, Carol Riddick, joined by my co host, Donovan West, and we have been talking in this hour with Dr. Tina Scott. We're talking about living a single life. We're talking about navigating singlehood. We're talking about doing so, being lonely, dealing with grief, depression, just trying to get through the day. And I don't mean to say that by saying that everything about single life is negative or unhappy, because it is not. But for those who deal with those particular aspects of living a single life, we're addressing that, and we're talking about that. We're saying it's all right to be single. Hey, I'm single and I'm all right with it. But we've been touching on a lot of things. I want to let those of you who are interested in knowing how you can reach Dr. Scott in case you have something about which you want to talk with her. Because as I've made you all aware, she is the licensed professional counselor, and she can help you through some of these situations, help you through a situationship. And as I said earlier, a none of my business ship as well. So, Dr. Scott, would you please let everybody know how they can reach you and where they can find you before we move on?
Sure, sure. You can actually call my line, my office line directly, 215-519-2531. And also visit my website, drtinascott.com. And also on social media and all those things. But like I said, I navigate Instagram and Facebook better than anything else. Everything else I'm still trying to figure out.
Yeah, we had that conversation too.
Yeah.
Donovan, I want to
Yeah.
say thank you so much, for coming into the conversation. What would you like to contribute to the conversation?
Listen, I'm sitting here. I ran out of paper. You see,
No.
I got my notes here. I'm being like, hey, I was not planning on, I was not planning on having a journal moment, but now Dr. Scott got me like, hey, I gotta go back to the journal, write down something. Like a funny thing occurred as Dr. Scott was talking. I thought to myself, man, you got me in my bag right now about that. But no, there's a lot that she mentioned, and I think one of the things that I often refer to that's very similar in terms of like repressing certain feelings, certain traumas, experiences that we have, and how they tend to rear their ugly heads at different times. Right? We talked a little bit earlier about those minds, right? Those emotional minds that in many ways they just lay there and still active, even though they were set 15, 20 years ago, whatever may be the case, and then sometimes even when we are aware of what they are, but we intentionally repress those feelings, those thoughts or whatever, thinking that, we can just, survive it and move forward. That's okay for the moment, right? I think that's the thing that we typically forget. We romanticize this idea of surviving, right? This idea of surviving things and just the struggle of things and just being able to push through and that's it, as opposed to intentionally detangling or detaching and throwing away these situations, these experiences. So I refer to it as preserving the pain, right? We preserve it. We literally put it on ice, and we don't necessarily actually go about detangling it, breaking it down, and making sure that it's actually exposed for what it is. And when it's exposed to the elements, then it really organically gets an opportunity to erode, right?
Mhm.
Organically gets to actually break down by way of the elements of life, meaning over time and other experiences, hopefully, creating that opportunity for you to be able to handle that situation longer. But instead, because we bury it, it stays perfect. right? That pain stays perfect. That experience stays perfect. And it feels like it literally happened yesterday. So, sometimes you can talk with someone and have that dialogue, and they will literally break down, and you will see that 7-year-old version of themselves or that 10-year-old version of themselves, even though they are multiples of that same number, right? And the reason for it is because that pain has been perfectly preserved. And I think, again, going back to what Dr. Scott said about, addressing those things, because they are significant. And while you may say, oh, that was so long ago, or I don't really know why that thing that happened 15 years ago, 20 years ago, why it's really messing with my relationship now, it is because we preserved it, and it has every bit of power that it had 20 years ago. Like, there's nothing, it's been perfectly recharged, and it's
Mm-hmm.
good to go. It's in its original package, and everything is pristine. And I think that the more that we look at it through that kind of lens, the more we can understand ultimately why we have to, we need to remove it. We need to isolate it, remove it, get rid of it, and put it in this proper place, which is the trash. But easier said than done.
Yeah.
And I think that the more mature we get, the more intelligent we get, the more sophisticated our answers get, right? The more, I'm pretty sure Dr. Scott is like, okay, we just went through 3 sessions. I know you paid on time, but we're not getting anywhere, kind of thing, because
Yeah.
we develop these more sophisticated layers for explaining why we're not progressing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the hardest part, especially when you talk about the CBT approach, because ultimately you have to help the client navigate and actually have an aha moment based off of their own words and experiences. Like, you actually have to elicit that out of them. And what's challenging is that you're talking to someone who has developed a more sophisticated program of delusion, right? Like, it
Mm.
becomes, this is what I know how to function. I'm making this kind of money. I have this kind of impact. I have all these other great things that I do. I survived that situation. What are we even talking about? They're talking slick like a used car salesman, and you're just sitting there. Dr. Scott is there lacing up
Yeah.
her dance shoes, like, okay, I guess we're going to do this number. I
We
guess we're going to dance this way. But a
we
lot of
talked about that.
yeah, a lot of what she
We
shared just now was like,
yeah.
yeah, that part.
Well, she touched on that as well, and we talked about accountability. We talked
Yeah.
about owning, who you are. And I was going to ask Dr. Scott for you to address that too, but I'm so glad you said that, talking about people who come in, in that way,
Mhm.
because I know you see that a lot. But it's so important. That's another reason why we are here. That's
Yeah.
why we have this show. That's why
That's
we
right.
have Love and Life, because we're here to talk about all of that. We're here to crack that egg. We're here to have what we consider those hard conversations, and this is the space in which we do it.
Mhm.
We are unapologetic here. We are non-judgmental here. This is where we do. I mean, listen, I've shared enough of my business already, and we're just having a conversation, but I feel comfortable doing so because we are family. I consider you family. I'm calling you family, and I'm being open and honest about who I am, what I am, and what my life is, and what everything in my life means to me. Dr. Scott, I would like for you to address that once again and talk about how you approach those individuals that come into your office in that way, not owning who they are and accepting no accountability.
Well, here it is. I'm a stranger to most of them, right? Even though I may have been a referral, but they really don't know me. So it's this thing that we talk about, the therapeutic alliance, and we gotta allow that to evolve. So when someone first come in, I don't expect them to trust me right off the bat. So I have to establish some rapport. I got to provide a high level of empathy. I got to let them know that I'm team them, and I want to actually see them get to the finish line, whatever they set it out to be. So we allow for that to unravel, and we allow for that to evolve, build that alliance, build that trust. And sometimes that don't happen until like the second or third session, right? Because the first session, I'm getting all the preliminary stuff, either myself or my staff or a member of my team. And then we get into a lot of what they're sharing. And sometimes clients may say to me, Dr. Scott, I'm really talking surface stuff, right? I said, well, when you're ready to go deep, I'm suited up and I'm ready to go deep with you. But whatever you get out, it's a starting point, right? Because we got to join somewhere. And I understand that. So sometimes it's not all about just the mask that people wear. Sometimes it's about safety. Share
Mm.
my stuff with you and you not tell the world? Can I share my stuff with you and you don't frown your face up and start judging me like, wow, like I get some stuff in the room. And sometimes I gotta sit back and I might say, oh, that was the first time that I ever experienced that one, right? And I'll be
Mhm.
honest, I'm like, this is new, but come on, let's work through it, right? Because I want to make sure that you understand my facial expressions. My facial expression isn't looking at you like, oh my God. My facial expression is this is new.
Mhm.
Let's work with this. It may be new versus what you're saying, but all problems fall in certain categories. So then I place it in whatever category it is, and then because God is in the room with me, and when He gives me the tools and He gives me the words to say, I just spit it right on out. And the whole thing is getting to that point of healing, right?
Right.
Then you got some people that come in and they're just like, I'm perfect. I'm like, yo, well, you came here to me.
Mhm.
Help me
Mhm.
understand how I can help you. And I let them tell me, like, well, if they say, well, they don't need anything, I'm like, well, you wasting your money because we're not just here to talk, right?
Right.
And sometimes I have to challenge the people in front of me. And then sometimes I may even go off of my intake sheet. I'm like, well, based off of what you wrote when you was home alone, these are some of the things that you said you were coming in here with. Is this accurate? And
Right.
then it's like, oh, I didn't know you really read that. No, I read that. That's why I want you to send it in before you come in so I can have some familiarity with you and I can actually make sure I'm engaging with you because I have to study you before you get in the room, while you're in the room, and when you leave, because it ain't over. I got to make sure that I show up as the best clinician that I possibly can be so I can help you through your stuff. So I need you
Right.
to show up
That
because
makes so much sense.
it's a partnership. That's what it
How
is.
I'm sorry. How important is having a base in faith in a person's progress when they come to see you?
Well, here it is. So we know everybody don't have faith.
Mhm.
And they say faith is small as a mustard seed.
Mhm.
You know why it's small? Because the mustard seed grows out to be one of the most biggest plants or biggest things, right? But here it is. Everybody doesn't have faith. So even though everybody don't have faith, I just ask God and the Holy Spirit just to show up and let me be whatever light they need to be. But I always challenge my clients, wherever you get your power source from, your power, tap into it, right? Because some
Mhm.
people may say, well, I don't believe in nothing. I believe in myself. And I'm like, okay, wherever
Mhm.
you get your power source, tap into it. And then if you ain't getting any power from it, then you may need to figure out another place to hook up to. It's not my job to, when I'm in a therapy room, to connect you to any source, any power source, meaning God, because that's unethical, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
But when you give me that green light, because that's what I feel when the permanent change come in, when you allow God and the Holy Spirit to come into the room. But again, everyone doesn't have faith. And when they don't have faith and they just believe in themselves, that's when things keep going. When we talk about going around in circles.
Yes. Oh, that also adds to that conversation of accountability
Yep.
because that Dr. Scott Donovan, when I tell you, so when I reached out to Dr. Scott, I explained to her that the topic of today's show was so important to me. I cannot thank you enough. Family, that wraps up today's episode of Love and Life on WURD, Progressive Black Talk Media. Thank you for spending some time with us. Your company and attention are always welcome. Thank you to the entire WURD family, my co-host Donovan West, our gracious show producer, the phenomenal Tiffany Bacon, and to our guest, our incredible guest, Dr. Tina Scott.
Woo!
Yes, yes, yes. We are wishing you all a great night, a great morning, and a great rest of your day. Remember, we're all in this together, so be good to you and to those around you. And make sure you join us at midnight for another edition of Love and Life on WURD, Progressive Black Talk Media. Oh, yeah. If they Thank you